Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all of you, depending on your locations. And thank you very much for joining us today to this very important and critical roundtable, where we are going to launch a research paper that was conducted and planned by SIHA in partnership with Shared Planet and supported by the Swedish government and IDEA International. I would also like to acknowledge that this current launch we are organizing for this important paper that looks at the impact of the war on Sudanese women economic conditions and livelihoods is also supported by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. My name is Halil Karib, and I work as the Regional Director of the Strategic Initiative for Women in the Horn of Africa. And today we are going to have a very interesting and important conversations about, the economic violence and what women have endured as a result of Sudan brutal conflict. This particular paper is it looked at a small sample. We know that the losses of women across Sudan has been massive, but based on our, the limitations, we couldn't do it across Sudan, but we look primarily, at women who actually impacted by the conflict in and around Khartoum. We looked at their experiences and how they were affected by the massive looting that has taken place across the country, but particularly zooming in Khartoum. And we also, examined how with that, stripping women of their wealth, of their saving, of their economic capital affected them in their life as they are trying to move forward. The paper also offers a critical insight into the Sudan's already inherited gender disparities and the challenges that women are facing accessing resources as a result of, unjust laws, whether it's successions and inheritance laws or laws related to property and ownership, And then, the tedious effort and the work that Sudanese women has been doing to accumulate some minimal wealth that's unfortunately they were stripped of as the result of of the attack on the multiple cities and the massive act of lootings. The paper has interviewed a number of women in different parts of Sudan, but also spoke to women in Egypt and to women in Kampala. And it also, as I said, looked at it provided recommendations in terms of how important it is to equip women economically as part of the recovery of Sudan, of the current conflict, and as part of the efforts towards peace building as well. And it also looked at how women, despite the fact that they were stripped of their income and of their capital, they still continue to be innovative and creative and to identify other means of income to support their families and their communities. We have a really excellent group of speakers with us today. But before we go to our speakers who are going to comment on the paper, and they will share their own experiences about women's struggle, in terms of accessing to resources and livelihood and some sort of, economic dependency. We are going to listen to the one of the main researchers who contributed to this paper, Mariam Musa. She is a consultant with Shared Planet consultancy firm, who actually led the work, as I mentioned earlier, in this research. And Miriam, she served as the project coordinator of this paper. And I would say she has done an amazing work navigating, the Sudanese communities and women networks in Sudan and outside of Sudan. And before she worked, Miriam, she worked with Oxfam, she worked with ILO, and she was also working with Norwegian refugee councils. And she supported projects that, mostly characterized by intersectionality of gender and economic justice and humanitarian response. Miriam, she has her master from London Schools of Economics, and her research explore feminist political economy, displacements, and collective organizations. And she primarily focusing on women in conflict and post-conflict. Miriam, we're very grateful that you are here today with us. Miriam is going to give us a snapshot of the paper. And then from there, we are going to move to our other speaker. Over to you, Miriam.
Thank you, Ustaza Hala. It's so great being here with the SIHA team. We really appreciate the partnership that we have with you. Ramo, did you start screen sharing? Yeah, can everyone see the screen properly? I can get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ustaza Hala, for introducing me. My name is Mariam Musa. I am a consultant at Shared Planet. I lead the gender work stream that we have at Shared Planet, and I work across the humanitarian and just transitions practice area. As Dr. Hala mentioned, I also had the privilege of coordinating this research with SIHA. Now, before we get started with the presentation, I know I have 10 minutes to speak. I just want to say this project came at a moment of deep urgency. When we first took on this project, we knew that we weren't responding to just a humanitarian crisis. We were witnessing the collapse of entire systems that women in Sudan had built their lives around. And in the middle of that collapse, women have been the ones that are carrying families, communities, and local economies on their backs. So we really hope that this report centers those experiences, and this is, what we're aiming to showcase today. If we go to the next slide, sorry, yeah, thank you, Ramo. This is the agenda for my presentation. I'll be basically going through what motivated the research, how we approached it, and most importantly, what we learned. We'll start off by talking with the purpose and then give an overview of the main findings and then delve deeper into the more detailed aspects, so the literature review, how we approach the methodology, and then talk about women's lived experiences and the war's economic impacts, and then share the recommendations that the report came up with. If we go to the next slide, before I get started, I want to give a shout out to the Shared Planet team that helped conduct this research and draft this report. So Sophie was the project director, Alessandra, Jean-Michel, and Siwei, who are all present with us today to see the report launch. Thank you so much for your support in making this research come to life. And yes, we're super excited to share this report with you. Now, to get started, if we go to the next slide. Yes, so we started the study with one big goal, is to capture the gendered economic impact of the war in Sudan, especially with a focus on the effects of looting, forced displacement, and the near total breakdown of formal system. We know from past conflicts that women's economics experience are often erased from data and policy. So we focused on bringing forward what's usually invisible. It's something that we are well aware of. These kind of aspects are not mentioned in mainstream reports, so we really made sure that our report captures on things like care work, home-based production, mutual aid, and informal labor, all of which women have been using since the onset of the war and right now to survive and support others. And of course, we approach this from a feminist political economy lens. So we weren't just restricted to saying what has happened. We didn't want it to be descriptive. We wanted to explore how power, gender, and economic roles are being reshaped by war. So this is the overarching objective of the research, is to sort of shine the light on a narrative that is not being discussed and provide effective and inclusive solutions for post-conflict economic recovery, transitional justice, and a gender-responsive peace process in Sudan. This is the objective that we had in mind. If we go to the next slide, sort of talking about the main findings, summarizing it before we delve deeper into the details of the report, we found 4 recurring themes. So looting is near universal from our research. As Dr. Hala mentioned, we are aware that we spoke to a small sample because of the constraints of the report, but from this sample, 88% of women that we spoke to has experienced looting. For many, this meant losing their businesses, savings, household assets, and even the basic tools of trade. So it meant that women were starting from square one, from point zero. The second point is displacement is layered and repeated. So women weren't just displaced once, many had to flee multiple times with no guarantee of shelter, safety, or income. The third point that we came across is access to resources is deeply unequal, which created a lot of economic challenges in host communities and shelters. So when we talked to women in focus groups and interviews, we didn't just stop as when it comes to the story of how they got displaced. We also explored their experiences in displacement and what were the systems of support that were available to them when they went to host communities, whether that is in a different location in Sudan, so another city in Sudan, going from Khartoum to Port Sudan, for example, or from Khartoum to Cairo. And the last point is that women are sustaining life through informal means. There are individual and collective coping strategies that we came across. So things like home-based income generation, saving groups, informal businesses, these are survival economies that are built and led by women, and they're operating with the absence of a formal infrastructure. So if we move on to the next slide, this is sort of an overview of the literature review. Just sort of talking about the kind of literature that we looked at, and setting the scene to the primary data collection that we've done. So we aim to do a desk research that provides a comprehensive overview of literature, discussions, and narratives that are related to the war in Sudan. That ranged from reports, research studies, data, news articles, and gray literature. We had a focus on literature that has been published since the start of the war in April 2023, but we also try our best to include earlier publications to showcase the difference in the economic system from before and after the war. And the key finding that we had is that the international humanitarian sector frames the mainstream narrative on conflict, so focusing on macro trends without providing the gendered aspect to such a humanitarian issue. This is the literature review. If we move on to the next slide, we have a few outcomes. There are some existing gaps that we came across. So there, from the literature that we've seen, there are lack of nuances and insights on the deeper dynamics of the conflict and its gendered impacts that do not appropriately reflect women's lived experiences or their coping mechanisms. And we also found that there's limiting but existing feminist and gender responsive literature, again, but they don't really focus on the hidden gendered economic impact specifically, such as care work and informal work within the mainstream narrative of the war in Sudan. And we have organized our literature findings in the following themes that are found in the right-hand side, but for the sake of time, I won't be going through them right now. So we can move on to the next slide. On methodology. So this is to showcase and elaborate on how we conducted the research. We used feminist qualitative methods that are grounded in intersectionality. So we have looked at things like age, class, displacement status, and geography. These are things that we took in mind when we were talking to women. And we've conducted further quantitative analysis of the sampled women to identify patterns and common needs. So we have done interviews with 58 women, 20 of which were in focus group discussions, 38 of which were in semi-structured interviews. And we have done so across 5 locations: Kassala, Port Sudan, Sennar, Cairo, and Kampala. So we have looked at, the internal displacement within Sudan, but also displacement of women outside of Sudan. And we also included we incorporated the class aspect of that within our research as well. And on the right-hand side, you'll find some pictures of the methodology and the interviews that we had with women as well. Moving on to the next slide, we also acknowledge that there are some limitations that we've had. So the research study took place within a short time frame, and that meant that the research stops at a specific point in time, so we did not incorporate later events and reports. We focused on Sudanese women, but of course the war in Sudan has impacted different people, so our research inherently excluded non-Sudanese refugee women in Sudan who are also affected by the war, and this warrants for further research to address this gap. And of course, we are well aware that because there were some connectivity issues and restricted time, we knew that there was some participation access limitations, but we hope that these limitations can inform further research on the matter. If we move on to the next slide, I would talk about just because I'm aware of time, I would want to say what this slide basically illustrates is that because of the war, women's employment has collapsed and business ownership has dropped by almost half. Wage work was dropped as well. Unemployment surged highly, and the reason is looting. Entire livelihoods were wiped out overnight. One woman told us, I lost everything I built in my life. Another woman had an anecdote about her leaving all of her gold behind, thinking that it was safe, only to know that it was looted and to return to an empty home. But then that didn't stop at looting, because displacement was the next blow. Women were pushed to flee, not just once, but repeatedly, which, of course, breaks any continuity in work, income, or routine. Each time they had to start over with less than before. Moving on to next slide, please. As I've said earlier in the main findings discussion, women were not just displaced once, they were displaced more than once. So 1 in 3 Sudanese women that we've spoken to has experienced displacement more than once. And we've included a quote below on women, the gendered experience of displacement. So how does it affect women? Women are more vulnerable to displacements due to beatings, killings, violations, and incidents of violence. So again, this sort of shines the light on the gendered impact of displacement as well. If we move to the next slide, please. We also want to showcase on how, we don't want to stop at how women were affected, but how did they react to that? Women are, they've responded to that through informal channels, because the war has led to the absence of formal means of supporting themselves. So we saw women shifting to things like soap making businesses and trading services, and making food at home and selling it. This was a matter of life or death to them, but we also saw the effect of collective care through shared housing, pooled savings, or mutual aid groups. So we're seeing a shift from these formal systems to informal ones that emphasize on the collective nature of how women are standing together to face the implications of the war. And it was honestly so inspiring to see the different stories that women had of starting at point zero, but being able to make it in a host community, because these formal systems were not accessible to them anymore. And that sort of really informed our recommendations as to, if we want to include a gender inclusive recommendation and have an inclusive peace process, we need to take these informal channels and means into consideration. If we move on, we've sort of used the utilized experiences, these understandings of collective and informal ways of responding to displacement and looting, to talk a little bit about how women are calling for peace. What are the future prospects and the prospective peace process? Women they want to restart again economically. So a lot of women in our quantitative analysis expressed that they want job opportunities, financial supports, and they also want to improve economic conditions. But this has been done through collective and informal channels, as I've mentioned. And this leads us to speak about, how can economic security happen in the peace process? What can be done, and how can we shape our recommendations to make sure that this gendered element is included? Because women are not just asking for peace, they're also asking for justice, for dignity, and for the power to shape what comes next. So this definitely informed the way we shaped our recommendations, which I will present in the next slide. So these are the recommendations that we came up with. Of course, they are open to discussion. This is why we are having the panel here today. The first one is, of course, a ceasefire and an inclusive peace process. This was the top recommendation that emerged. This was the top theme that emerged from all of the focus group discussions and all of the interviews that we had. And it's not just any form of peace process, it's one that guarantees women's agency and leadership in defining what this peace process looks like, and one that provides reparations for the specific gendered economic experiences that these women faced when it comes to looting and displacement. The second thing is women's participation in peace negotiations, of course. So we need to guarantee that women are active and influential in peace negotiations and settlements. We need to recognize their critical role and unique perspectives in achieving sustainable peace. The third point is on transitional justice and accountability for gender gender-based crimes. We need to prioritize transitional justice, focusing on gender-based violence, holding perpetrators accountable, and ensuring that women's voices are central in the reconciliation and justice process. And of course, in economic empowerment for women, we need to allocate urgent funding and capital to support these informal and collective income-generating activities and provide support to the small enterprises through different tools such as direct aid, microgrants, and capacity building training in a way that will ensure economic independence and resilience. And finally, we need to focus on gender-sensitive humanitarian aids and services. So we need to make sure that humanitarian aid is allocated correctly to the right people, that an aid that takes into account insights from the lived experiences of women, one that ensures that water, food, and sanitary products are available in host communities and IDP camps and that women can access them, and one that expands on physical, emotional, and psychological support services, specifically for women and girls that have been affected by the war. And with that being said, I think that wraps up my presentation. Sorry if I went a bit over time. We hope that this research has shown not what women in Sudan have lost, but also what they are holding up. It was so devastating listening to the lived experiences of women. But they're stories of devastation, but they're also stories of determination, collective strength, and dignity. So we really hope that this report managed to bring those narratives into light. And with that being said, I want to thank Siha again for having us to talk about the report today. We really, really think highly of the network, and we really, really have so much appreciation for getting to partner with you on this. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for such a comprehensive presentation, giving us a snapshot in a very, very short time about a very rich and comprehensive research paper. I would like to stress that this research paper is also available in Arabic, and I think our team are going to drop it in the chat for those of you who are interested in downloading it, or they will also share the link so that you could have access to the paper. It's an extremely valuable paper because it looks at the contributions of women in the Sudanese economy, which is something that constantly has been invisible, not recognized, and not acknowledged. So to what extent women have been contributing, to the Sudanese economy and to the livelihood, of their communities and their families, and then how the fact that they were targeted, by looting and by systemic violence, is actually affecting communities and affecting Sudan. I would like to, I apologize, I should have announced that at the beginning. We have a very, very good English-Arabic translation. So all you need to do is to go to the interpretation panel, button, which is the globe sign. And then if you want, you can choose to listen to the to this webinar on Arabic. So please feel free to do that. Also, if you have any questions or comments, or if things are not clear to you, please feel free to write in English or in Arabic at the chat your comment, and then our team can immediately communicate that to us. This is a very safe space, and the research, however, the research paper is meant to be shared widely and publicly, but any other quotes or informations by any of the participants, if you want to share, kindly communicate to Siha about that, or request a permission from Siha. I believe my colleagues are going to also put our email for further communications. Now, I would like to invite our second speaker, Madam Fatima Ahmed. Fatima, she's the founder and the director of the Zainab Women in Development, ZWD. Fatima's organizations has been working for a very long time, for decades, in Gadaref states and in Khartoum states and other parts of Sudan. They have a significant experience in supporting women farmers and women in the informal economy. And really an extremely pioneering experience. They are playing a very, very critical role in extending help to women farmers and women, in the informal economy, and women displaced in Sudan, particularly in Eastern Sudan around Gadaref. But just before I come to you, Fatima, I would like to acknowledge that this webinar is being listened to by women in many parts of Sudan. So please allow me, Fatima, to welcome my sisters, my colleagues, and my friends in Kassala who are listening to us right now. I would also like to welcome and greet my friends and my colleagues in Addalanj in South Kordofan. You are highly welcome. I would also like to welcome my friends and my colleague in Kadugli. I am very, very grateful. We are all very, very grateful for joining us, despite the challenging times. And I would also like to welcome, friends and colleagues in Al-Ubaid. Such a pleasure to have you. And then finally, lastly and not last, I would like to welcome our friends and colleagues and members of our networks in Blue Nile, in Damazin. So this is a very busy and crowded space by women from across Sudan. So just for the rest of the speakers, to bear in mind that members of our networks and affiliates, and we are so grateful that they are joining us despite the challenges of communication. Enormous effort was put to enable them to be part of this. Ustaza Fatma, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Good morning and good evening, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Ustaza Hala, for the introduction and for inviting me to be part of this very important panel about the finding of the research and to launch the finding of the research, and also to talk about one of my favorite topic is agriculture, but unfortunately now we are talking about the harmful of the war to agriculture sector in Sudan. I will not waste time because I have very limited time. I will go ahead to the presentation. As we know, war in Sudan has negative impact on various sectors, with agriculture being one of the most severely affected. The agriculture sector is not only crucial for food security, but also serves as a source of livelihood for 80% of the population in Sudan. Women farmers who play a vital role in agriculture production face unique challenges during this war. The presentation highlights the multifaceted impact of Sudan war on the agriculture sector and highlights the specific challenges and resilience of women farmers. The direct impact of the war on agriculture sector, one, destruction of infrastructure. The war caused severe destruction of vital agriculture infrastructure, including irrigation system, roads, storage facility, loss of agriculture machinery, etc. This disruption hampers the ability of farmers to cultivate crops and transport produce to market, no market linkage. Number two, displacement of farmers. Sudan war caused mass displacement. It is the largest displacement crisis globally, forcing millions of farmers to abandon their land and livelihood. Three, loss of livestock. Livestock is a critical asset for millions of farmers. The war caused big loss of livestock due to violent theft or inadequate resources to feed and care for animals. This loss not only affects food security production, food production, but also the economic ability of farming families, many farming families. For disruption of supply chain. War disrupts supply chain, affecting the availability of seeds, fertilizer, access to credit, and other essential inputs, plus high prices of fuel. This causes a decline in agriculture productivity. Prices of agriculture inputs such as seeds, pesticide, agricultural services, and fuel has led to reduction in the areas cultivated by both small and large scale farmers. The decrease in agricultural financing ceiling from banks increased the risk of failing to conduct agriculture operation on time, leading to higher post-harvest losses. The limited cash liquidity in banks make it difficult for farmers to meet the seasonal labor requirements necessary for carrying out essential agriculture operations, such as planting and harvesting. The low demand for agriculture crops for export, combined with rising production costs and limited cash availability, has resulted in a decline in crop prices. Inflation has led to increased prices for goods and services, accelerating the suffering of producing family in terms of nutrition, education, and health. Due to these challenges, severe food security catastrophe, nearly 30.4 million people, two-thirds of the population, including 15.6 million most children, require urgent humanitarian assistance. More than half the population is acutely food insecure. Famine conditions have been confirmed in at least 5 areas, and millions are at immediate risk of famine in the conflict-affected regions of Darfur, Kordofan, Khartoum, and others. This marks the highest level of food insecurity recorded in Sudan history. Children have been spared, haven't been spared. According to the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, more than 3.2 million children under the age of 5 projected to face acute malnutrition in 2025. Also, this affect limited access, which is remain a challenge. The crisis is not only about food security, it is about access. Markets have been looted, supply chains severe, served, and roads rendered unsafe. Essential items like seeds, as we mentioned, fertilizer, fuel out of reach, and prices have caused many families simply cannot access or afford what they need to survive. Limited access continue to block life-saving aid from reaching millions, especially those trapped in the conflict zones such as Darfur and Kordofan region and others. Humanitarian workers face grave danger since the onset of the conflict. I come to the impact of war on women farmers. Number one, increased burden of responsibility. Women take an additional responsibility during the war as men being recruited as fighters or maybe migrated in search of safety. This burden lead to increased stress and reduced ability to manage agriculture production effectively. Two, limited access to resources. Women typically have less access to land, credit, and agriculture training compared to men. The disruption caused by war accelerates these inequalities, making it even more challenging for women to maintain their agriculture activities. Number three, vulnerability to gender-based violence. Unfortunately, Sudan war, GBV, including sexual violence, used as a weapon of war. Many of women farmers are victims of gender-based violence, which impacts their ability to work in agriculture and further limits their economic opportunities. Women farmers' role in food security, despite the challenges, often play a crucial role in ensuring food security for their families and communities during crisis. Their resilience and resourcefulness can lead to innovative agriculture practices that help sustain livelihood. Resilience and adaptation. Number one, this is what is going on during this war, community support network. Women farmers rely on community support networks to share resources, knowledge, and labor. This network actually been instrumental in rebuilding agriculture activities during these conflicts. Innovative practices. Faced with adversity, women farmers adopt innovative agriculture practices such as intercropping, organic farming, which enhance resilience against future shock. Advocacy and empowerment. Efforts that focus on empowering women farmers through access to education, resources, and decision-making processes really significantly impact agriculture recovery and make it possible for those women to produce during these 2 years of war. As conclusion, impact of war on the agriculture sector is profound, with long-term consequences for food security and livelihoods. Women farmers, while disproportionately affected, demonstrate remarkable resilience and adaptability in the face of adversity. Recognizing and addressing the unique challenges they face is crucial for effective recovery and development efforts in post-conflict setting. By supporting women farmers and integrating their needs into agriculture policies and programs, we can foster sustainable agriculture practice and enhance food security in the aftermath of conflict. I will stop here and continue if I have more time for just to share some of the experience of Zainab. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ustaza Fatma, for such a comprehensive presentation. Thank you for sharing, the challenges that women farmers are encountering, particularly the issues of safety and security and accessing their farm fields, the exploitations and what they are enduring. And the reality that, majority of farm workers in Sudan are women, which is something that typically has not been acknowledged, in all our economic policies. And I think you are raising very, very important critical points that require a completely different webinar to look into it. So we hope Zainab will also take the lead on this. Thank you very much once again. And also you are speaking to a group of women who are very connected to the issue of women farming, being in Kordofan or in Blue Nile, and this is one way of communities has managed or succeeded in maintaining their resilience and capacity to survive under current circumstances, being under siege for very, very long time. That was all led, by women and their efforts and so on. I would like to encourage the participants in this webinar to post their questions in the chat as much as possible, as we are running out of time. So please make sure that you post your question on the chat. I'm going to call on Nusayba Osman. Nusayba, she is a woman entrepreneur, and she is originally from South Kordofan. But she is also a Khartoum used to be a Khartoum-based woman. She has been displaced as a result of the war to Kassala, and she is someone who is actually putting together her own small business under very, very difficult circumstances. So we thought, it will be a good idea to listen briefly to Nusayba's experience, which is very, very inspiring. Nusayba, over to you. Nusayba, تفضلي.
You can start, Nusayba.
I don't know if the group in Kassala can hear me.
Hi, Nazik, can you unmute? Thank you. السلام عليكم، مساء الخير عليكم.
Hello, everyone.
السلام عليكم.
Hello, everyone.
تمام يا
عليكم.
نسيبة.
مساء
Go
الخير
ahead.
عليكم، سامعيننا؟
Can you
Yes,
hear us?
سامعينكم. Go ahead.
Yes, we can hear.
تفضلوا.
Yes, you can start.
السلام عليكم، مساء الخير.
Hello, everyone. Good evening to you. I'm pleased to be part of you to share my experience. I am Nusayba Usman Muhammad Abu Bakr.
مصممة ثياب سودانية.
I am a top Sudanese top designer. I was born in South Kordofan. I graduated from university,
شغف الرسم جوايا أنا.
but I am interested in top designing.
ممكن نستمر اقتصاديا
I thought of empowering myself economically and benefit the surrounding communities. I chose top designing.
بديت أعمل النشاط
I
الثقافي في
started
البيت.
I started to the work at home.
المواد الحمد لله
I got the material, the fabric, and I have now a good network.
بعدها ابتديت الشغل.
After that, I started the work.
قبل شهر من الحرب
I started
ابتديت الشغل. الحمد لله
the work 1 month before the war. The war came then, and
ما بقدر امشي والاسواق بقدر اجيب المواد بتاعتي.
after the war, I was no longer able to go to the markets.
المواد اللي انا بشتغل
All
فيها
the raw materials I used were burned, and
الزباين اللي جايين عايزين يطلبوا كده، فكان عندهم اولويات اساسيه يعني اكثر من
the clients no longer came to me for top designing because they had other priorities.
فبعدها قررنا انا واسرتي انه
Then my family and I decided to leave Khartoum.
احنا للجزيره.
We went to Jazeera State. This was our first displacement. We stayed there for a while. We went to another area. And we even were displaced 4 times. Then I thought of returning to resume my work. I did, but I didn't have cash and the financial ability to restart. These were the challenges I faced. But I have the passion and the hobby, and I am still insisting to resume my hobby. After that, I worked as sales agent with my elder brother so that I can collect money just to resume my top designing work. One challenge for me was how to collect the money. After that, I arrived at Kasala. One challenge I faced was that this is a new city. I didn't know where to go to get the raw material. And I didn't have enough cash to get the raw material. I had to ask so many people so that I can know where I can buy from. Because of these challenges, I worked with another designer who also designed tops. To get enough money. After that, I did other work so that I can collect money. I did some work related to making children stuff and other. I was confused because I didn't have enough money. I went back to the design I worked with. I told her that I wanted to start my own project, that we need enough money so that we get raw materials from Egypt and UAE. You can put your money with mine so that we bring the raw material. We did that, but another challenge emerged was that I didn't have a place to work in. Some girls and sisters saw me working and talking about my work in coffee gatherings. They saw that I was passionate, and they became passionate just to learn how to design top. I sat down. I sat down with those women and girls, and I wanted to help them. Now I want, but but at that time I had a problem with the place where I could work. Then we went to school and we talked to them through the project, and we asked them to allocate a class for us so that we can do our work. SIHA network supported us so much, and they had a role in giving us lectures about awareness raising about I had assistance, and I continued my work with the girls in teaching them how to design. Another challenge appeared that I don't know. I don't know how to market my work in Kassala. I don't know even the components and the culture of communities here in Kassala. So some girls told me that there are certain areas where you can sell and market your tops, and there are certain areas where you can also buy the raw materials. I was able to sell good number of my designs. Another challenge there is another problem. The governor of Kassala decreed just to evacuate the sheltering center. This means that I had to leave the state and to go to another area. Now I'm confused where I can go just to start my work and to find markets and clients for my products, because the priorities now for people is food and drink, and they won't just spend some money to sell to buy my products. This way I won't be able to continue my work. These challenges of financial ability and the marketing abilities, but recently, thank God, I was able just to continue the work I am passionate about, and to reach and to get to achieve what I wanted. Thank you, Nusayba, for sharing your experience. Thank you so much for the details you shared. Honestly, this is quite annoying.
Sorry, I'm supposed to be talking in English. Yeah. So thank you very much for the detailed presentation, and thank you for sharing with us your experience, but also thank you for sharing the challenges that you are currently encountering, and the fact that displaced people in Kassala are subjected to being pushed away from their current locations, which at least you were able to market some of your products. And now they want to push the displaced women into locations where it's going to be very difficult for them to access markets. So it's a constant challenges, constant obstacles, a lack of communications between local authorities and women and communities who are trying to sustain a living. And I'm someone who strongly believes that women economic empowerment and women access to resources is at the heart of women peace and security. So obstructing women from accessing income, that means you are jeopardizing their safety, their security, and their capacity to access resources, and then to be safe. So I really think this is an issue that definitely requires strong advocacy and strong mobilizations among the women movements and the groups in Kassala regarding women IDBs who are working and their attempt to access market. Once again, I am going to ask you to put your questions, comments in the chat, because we still have another speaker. So if you have a comment or if you have a question, please write it in the chat. And I really apologize for that, but we're already exceeded the time. I am going to invite our last speaker here, Ms. Manal Abdel Halim. Manal Abdel Halim, she is currently an independent consultant, but she is also an economist, and she is someone who worked in a large number of women economic empowerment projects, women access to resources. She has a practical experience, on women economic rights, enabling women to access income, improve their livelihoods, and so on. Manal, also she served as a SIHA board member, and she also worked for a number of Sudanese civil society organizations. Manal, I'm so sorry, but if you can make your interventions brief, that will be great. So at least yourself and other speaker will have time to answer some of the questions that we are receiving. Go ahead.
طيب شكرا جزيلا. سامعني؟
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
أيوة
صوتي
سامعني
مسموع؟
خالص. Yeah, very clear.
صوتي مسموع؟
Yes, we can hear you يا منال.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear
تمام.
you.
طيب
Yeah.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much.
لأنه أنا عايز زي ما قالت هالة
As
الزمن
Hala has said, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to be quite brief. I was listening to all the participants.
مريم تكلمتنا عن
Miriam told us about the research, and Fatma then told us about the different challenges, about all the destruction that has taken place, all the afflictions that have afflicted the basic infrastructure in Sudan. However, I want to speak about something which is very crucial, and that's about our preparations in the post-conflict era. What kind of strategies and what kind of mechanisms are we going to adopt, which will enhance women's participation and women's economic participation, and how they will be able to be prepared for this time. So as Nusiba said, she said that she has no funding because they're very productive, as we've already said. As we previously said, the women farmers provide us with 80% of our agricultural products. So I just want to reiterate that we have 7 strategies or 7 opportunities, which will facilitate the introduction of certain modalities, which will help women participate in the economic process. The first thing is, first of all, to break away from this kind of routine and standardized understanding of women's participation, which is dominated men. So basically, restricting women to certain sectors of economic activity, such as baking cakes and sewing clothes. We really need to move past this, because we need to actually introduce women into technical vocational skills, which have been restricted to men in the past. Vocational training has not been part of our formal educational system, and it's always been on the fringe. So we don't have a strategy which makes this kind of training more attractive. It's vilified. And I remember that Saiha has experience or expertise in this domain, where it has created a platform for asking for women to be active participants in different spheres of economic activity. There was a center in Khartoum which was called the German Vocational Training Center, and Saiha had actually provided funding for the training of 45 young women. So this was a great achievement, and they were very distinguished. And this intake was a huge leap, because prior to Saiha actually intervening, the enrollment of women had been very limited and limited to 5%. So the director actually expressed that this kind of funding had actually changed the image of women's participation in these vocational training spheres. One of the husbands had actually told his wife that he wasn't against her actually gaining this kind of training, working in carpentry or working, but he said that maybe she wouldn't be able to find the job. So this was a direct challenge. And this also illustrates that we have some challenges, however, but it's also important to expand and to go beyond these challenges, so that we are able to destabilize these stereotypical gender roles attributed to specific occupation of specific occupations. I think it's important not to romanticize the fact that women are able to penetrate these fields, but it should serve as an impediment to trying to shake these stereotypes to some degree. Some women have actually worked very extensively in participating in the community kitchens. They've worked in the emergency response rooms. There have been 5 emergency response rooms as examples. In Kosti, in Gadarif, in Damazin, and in Sinnar. And there's been a representation of the participation of these young women in these emergency response rooms. And they have shown that they've shown their expertise in this field, but this has also perhaps led them to think about envisaging such participation in the future, that they will be able to continue in this domain from a business perspective post-conflict. At the beginning of the war, I was speaking in conservative areas in my region, specifically in my region of Shandi, that the girls were very reticent about working at such late hours, because the community is quite conservative. However, due to the circumstances of war, some of the stereotypes or some of the restrictions were lifted because there was a necessity for women to be able to mobilize and to move into these public spaces. So this enforced new leadership roles within a conservative society. So the war circumstances actually allowed women some space to actually be able to participate in the economic sphere. And now we know that Khartoum has been completely destroyed, Jazeera has been completely destroyed, but there are business opportunities in different areas such as Kassala, such as Gadaref. People have moved their factories and they've moved their businesses to these different regions. And these movements have created different opportunities on new novel forms of entrepreneurship. There's no industry in Shandi, for example, that there are no medical supply factories in certain regions of Sudan, such as the Nile River Nile state, but this has actually changed. As Miriam said, even in Egypt, women's presence in Egypt. I'm in Egypt myself, and I've observed the economic activity which is taking place in Egypt in terms of the creation of bazaars. It's very difficult to penetrate the economic markets of Egypt. However, we have seen that Sudanese women have managed to actually penetrate or to create some kind of a modicum of business acumen. It's been a limited opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. So the Sudanese have actually managed to create Sudanese networks within the Egyptian context. And they've managed to learn new skills. They've learned how to actually market, how to actually advertise their economic prowess. And 85% of women farmers have been limited or constrained in the past. And Sheikh Al-Amin was the leader of the Farmers Association in Jazeera. He said that the women were not enabled to actually own the land, and they were told that they needed constant male guardianship in order to access these rights. But this has now changed because the women's rights to lands have actually evolved. It's a complicated situation that we need to address in Sudan. It's not going to be resolved immediately. However, there are extremely intricate relations pertaining to land ownership and land rights in Sudan. And there are challenges, as I've said, and there are agricultural policies which deprive women of their rights, because women are actually the ones who engage most actively in the actual process of the farming, but then are deprived of their rights to the profits. So, and they remain marginalized to a large extent. However, these challenges could be addressed through the war context, because women are more aware of how they need to challenge these issues. We have a very complicated policy, and the implementation of punitive aspects of jurisprudence, which make it very difficult for women to engage economically. Women are unable to actually have appropriate and adequate mobility patterns which facilitate their payment of certain expenses. So the fact that their mere mobility is constrained by poverty is one of the issues that needs to be addressed. So if we look at how the financial banking system is detrimental to women's participation, and if we look at what's happened within the urban centers, if we look at how there are challenges in terms of service provision, we need to look at the kind of structural violences and the institutional problems which are faced by women. We in SAIHA actually addressed some of these issues, some of these challenges, and we gathered huge amounts of information pertaining to how this issue related to such a bureaucratic process is impeding funding.
أستاذة منال
بيشيلوا قروش. انا لاقوني ناس قبل كده قبل 10 سنين في
أستاذة
ماليزيا
منال
موظفين كبار جشوا قالوا والله احنا جينا على حساب التمويل الاصغر دايرين
Yeah, the
نتدرب.
microfinance modalities are very extremely complicated in the Sudanese context and do not actually benefit those who are most in need. So we have to look at these professional categorizations and the organograms which are being deployed. And how these organizations, how these microfinance modalities are actually used in diverse capital cities. And how there are false promises of funding. And how women's associations, women food and beverage women's associations are actually promised funding which never comes through. And women are not able to access these funds. So I just want to raise this point, the point of how a microfunding in Sudan is one of the obstacles which is faced by women. And it's one of the issues pertaining to how women borrow and then find themselves in debt and then imprisoned because of these debts. So it's very important to focus on this aspect or this sector of microfinance. And we have to look at the example of Bangladesh, which is an exemplary example of how such microfinance can be managed. So why don't we actually take advantage of some of the experiences which have been very successful in other regions? There is a huge amount of resource which we can actually look to in the works of different organizations. Why doesn't the bank actually approach the poor? And what kind of assurances can we get? Whether you work, whether you don't work. Because the banks are actually not concerned with the success of the project. They're just more concerned about getting their capital back. And they're not concerned with people's actual lives. This depends on collective efforts. I want people such as Nusayba to actually become an institution rather than just an individual. We need to think about this on a more collective, from a more collective perspective.
الحاجات المطلوبة دي الحاجات المطلوبة دي الضمانات مش ضاري منك ضمانات مصرفية. فلو لم نلجأ للبرنسبلز الصحيحة حتكون عندنا أموال كثيرة ضايعة. طيب نتكلم البحث في حاجة مهمة جدا، ربط قضية النمو الاقتصادي أو قضية مساهمة النساء
أستاذة منال, can you hear me?
قضية وقف الحرب واستجابة.
أستاذة
Hello,
منال.
Manal. Please conclude. Thank you.
منال,
أختنا
can you
مريم
conclude
يوسف
please?
قالت موسى قالت إنه ده نساعد النساء في إنه يكونوا جزء من عملية السلام
منال, can you
والعدالة
conclude?
والمساءلة والانصاف.
Can
بنحصل
you
كيف يا جماعة؟
conclude?
لو ما نحن عاينا للإرث حقنا ما حننفذ العملية الحقيقية بتاعت السلام، لأنه الإرث حقنا كل العمليات من أديس أبابا 72 لحد جوبا تراك 2000
أستاذة منال قادرة تسمعيني
2020 لحد جوبا تراك 2020 دي كلها بنلقاها مفاوضات ثنائية ما أتت أكلاسي أي زول. لو جو بقول لك وين دي؟ هي عبارة عن ناس شايلين السلاح بتفاهم مع الحكومة، ما غايب عنها أي نوع من أنواع الأجندة. وين النساء؟
السلام
وين
عليكم أستاذة
النساء
منال. أستاذة
المدفوعات؟
منال
لاحظوا العملية دي بتكون كيف؟ نحن قاعدين طول الوقت نشاكو السلاح، قاعدين طول الوقت نكتب في ما بعد كده فور برايورتيز ومن شنو برايورتيز وأولويات النساء في السلام. كأننا بنتصغر.
I think it's very unfortunate that Ustaza Manal is not even answering her WhatsApp messages. And we really wanted to give, the different hubs an opportunity to speak up. We are trying to reach out to her just to tell her that, I don't know, apparently there is something wrong with her connection because she was not able to listen to us. But having said that, I would like to move to the questions from the groups, because there is a number of questions that was raised by the different groups. So the first questions we have received, it's about forced marriage and child marriage. And and basically the group are asking if the research have actually addressed the impact of the economic devastations on child marriage, which is becoming unforced marriage, and children's sexual exploitations, which is something becoming a pattern right now due to the extreme poverty of mothers and of families. So Miriam, are you there? Can I direct this question to you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Hala. Well, the research focused on the economic impact through the lived experiences of the women that were interviewed. So forced marriage was a theme that came up from the focus group discussions. They weren't the personal experiences of the women that were interviewed. So I've reviewed the transcript from the interviews and the focus group discussions, but a lot of women knew of girls that were their cousins or their friends that were forced into marriages, two soldiers, two older men, and women and girls that have been sexually exploited and have experienced sexual assault. So this is something that definitely emerged while we were having the discussions, but from an economic perspective, I wouldn't say that we really looked into the economic impact of forced marriages from the same lens as looting or displacement. So these are the correlations that we have. That is not to undermine the clear correlation between forced marriage and the gendered economic impact of women. So in conclusion, it was mentioned, it was a recurring theme in our research, but our report didn't make the direct connection yet, but this definitely gives room and the potential for us to explore this further in future work. Ustaza Hala, you're muted, sorry.
There is another questions from the Women with Disabilities group and women who are visually impaired. And they are asking if the research has looked at the women in their diversity, and the coping mechanisms, particularly of women with disabilities. I think that's really a good question. Yeah.
It is a really good question. Again, it's something that we spoke about in the beginning of the research. We know that our sample was quite small. So, we tried as much as we can to focus on the intersectionality of women, which is why we interviewed women in Cairo, we interviewed women in Kampala, we interviewed women that were displaced to other cities in Sudan, and we did see a class element. So women that were able to escape Sudan had the socioeconomic means to do that. So this is where the primary focus of intersectionality comes in. Also, migration, refugee status, those who have citizenship already, those that don't, how did they have different coping strategies? But from the disability perspective, it was more a part of the desk review and the literature review when it comes to the basic intersectional feminist analysis. And again, we understand that this was a research limitation because of the sample size, and also gives room for a future project as well.
No, absolutely. It is definitely an issue of limitations, and that's something that we have to keep in mind. And we are learning also about the terms of inclusivity, which is quite critical and important. There is a question that I would like to direct it to Ustaza Fatma or Ustaza Manal, if she is available, which is, it's a question about Sudanese, funders. There is plenty of, rich institutions and rich Sudanese, wealthy Sudanese men and women who accumulated resources out of doing business in Sudan for decades. And the question is why they are not contributing, to the women resilience, access to resources, and the experiences like Nusayba's experience, for example. So I think that's an important question and a comment as well that we should keep raising. So I don't know, Ustaza Fatma?
I can.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Really, it is very legitimate question, and I always think about this. Not only the women, wealthy women, even wealthy men. Unfortunately, this is like maybe not culture, because usually, it is from our religious values. We're supposed to support each other and to have and always compare with this charity. Funds in the hospital for who have no weight in Western society or in Western setting. But sometimes when I discuss this, there is something we cannot deny, nothing, but it's not like with institution and something that people can go and apply. Maybe just some like Hajjar, some families, they have announce call for proposal and supporting some of the groups and activities. But I think one time they told me some of speakers when I was discussing this, because the government also imposed this issue of zakah. They take from them money even if they don't want to pay, and this is why maybe they don't want to pay more. But even from my experience in Gaddarif, before zakah being imposed and by force, it was really many those big farmers or large farmers contributed a lot, even to build health institute, built classrooms. But during this 35 years, this something is being not going as.
And I think it's our role also to speak up.
I just wanted to share some points about the interventions of women organization, because what we have said, it is a lot of negatives and impacts, but at the same time there are many interventions from different groups and different organizations. But I would like just not to credit only Zainab, but women organization working on and at this time in Sudan with women farmers, including us. We really implemented many projects to empower economic empowerment of women. We've been able to distribute inputs for almost 60,000 small-scale farmers, a majority of them women. There is one project which is economic empowerment for women in business, which is also now have like outcome to have like network for to lead these women who are trying to do business. So there is no time, but maybe sometimes we can share these opportunities. But I would like to say women organization has to be themselves also empowered so they can also help in adversing these challenges and negative impact.
Thank you very much. We also have comments and questions about, the fact that, in addition to the war, the impact of climate change and how, that's an additional factor, that affected women as well, women farmers, women from pastoralist communities, and exacerbated the challenges of accessing of women to food and accessing to resources. There is also a very critical and important comments that speaks about the lack of support and investments on women resilience by the international communities. And they said the type of support that's provided, it's sort of a short-term support that does not address the fact that women, they need to work and they need to sustain income. And so there is no long-term investments on women accessing resources, improving their conditions, and subsequently, protecting themselves. Because if we are speaking about civilian protections, investing on women resilience is one of the most critical steps. And if we are talking about peace and conflict transformations, stabilizing communities is a first step towards peaceful communities. And the assumption that, wars ends with magic wands, typically it's not the case. We have to start pushing and we have to invest on stabilizing communities as much as we can, so that peace becomes a reality. I would really like to ask all of you, before we conclude here, to fill a questionnaire, a very short questionnaire, which is an evaluation that helps us to get better in organizing these forms of platforms. I know that many of you wanted to speak and many of you wanted to contribute. Unfortunately, the time has been extremely pressing and we cannot stay online for very long time. But your feedback and comments in terms of how we should run this platform is very, very important. So look at the chat, please, and give us your response to the to the questionnaire on the chat, and kindly stay just for 2 or 3 minutes. And I promise I'm going to stay also, while you are working on the questionnaire. So please complete the questionnaires before you depart the webinar. We would really appreciate that. And this is also a note to the team leaders at the different hubs, just to confirm that the participants are completing the questionnaires. It's extremely challenging, but we are very grateful that you stayed with us, you listened to us, and I'm very grateful to Miriam and her colleagues who actually worked on this research and accompanied us in this complex and difficult journey. And very, very grateful for Ustaza Fatma for her contributions and valuable input, and for Ustaza Manal for sharing her experience. And one final note I would like to share about Nusayba, the young entrepreneur who is doing multiple small businesses, including, designing Sudanese traditional costumes to selling local soap and all these things. Nusayba is getting married next week, so that's a good sign despite the challenges. So I would like to say congratulations to her, and we are really happy that, she is just, living her life, because also this is a way to stand up to violence, and to counter, this insecurity and violation. So big congratulations, Nusayba, and I really hope that your marriage will help you to sustain your business. I call on the women groups in Kassala State, as usual, to get organized and support the demands of women access to market, and how critical and important that, for the safety and peace of the community. With this being said, I'd like to thank you all for accompanying us in this webinar, and we hope to see you again in another platform for learning and engaging. Thank you very much, and please don't forget to complete the questionnaire. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.